Morning.
How are you today?
Good.
Cold? Okay, that's fine. I can do this, no problem. My name is Ravi. I'm from Malaysia. I teach in a university called University Kebangsaan Malaysia, or Kebangsaan in Malay means national. So it's National University of Malaysia. A kind of a recent academic. I joined the academia 6 years back. I was a bureaucrat for a long time, serving in several ministries. My last posting was as the head of international relations in the Ministry of Science. That is where I met Professor Nexus, who invited me to be in the bioethics fraternity, and I've been attending the ABA since then. My training is international relations. I teach international relations at the university. Other than looking at security issues, I also do a bit on environmental security, or I look at the environmental issues from a non-traditional security perspective, which is non-military perspective. And one of the areas which I've been working on for the last several years has been in the area of environmental security and ethics. In fact, Darren and I have a book out a few years back on environmental ethics in the Asia Pacific. My presentation today is to look at the nexus between two concepts. The first concept is the concept of environmental ethics. We know that environment is an important aspect of living. Without the environment, we cannot live. And the other part is the concept of human security. Just before I start, how many of you know what is human security? Anybody? Human security?
Security of human beings?
Right, security of human beings.
That's right.
All right. It is, well, the concept from the United Nations is the securitization of human beings, meaning moving the idea of security from a state-centric perspective, meaning why you need security is for the state. Who is supreme? The state. All right? Moving it from a state-centric perspective to a human-centric perspective. Security for whom? Security for humans and his habitat. Now I'm going to look at this nexus between how to bridge these two together and to link it in order life is much more sustainable and for the overall well-being of the mankind and the other sentient beings. Now this is a picture of some forest fire in Indonesia. This is not the recent one, but it was taken, I think it's last year. Okay, of course, we have a lot of problems in Southeast Asia now of the forest fires and haze problem in Indonesia, worse in Indonesia, in Malaysia as well as in Singapore. Let me just go to the next slide. Now, how do I go? Okay. Now, this is a picture of Kuala Lumpur. Not this year, last year. This year was same case, but this picture was taken. This is the clear sky that we used to have in KL, but sometimes we do, especially after rain. That's the Twin Towers. If you've been to KL, you know that's used to be the tallest building, but no longer. Alright, that is a skyline of Kuala Lumpur. And this, the haze situation, and you can see the Twin Towers, and and totally the last bottom two photos, you don't see the tower at all. Now this is the situation especially when you have haze, and this is a cross-border haze problem. Life is miserable. You have schools shut down. Of course, my kids were very happy about it. They don't need to go to schools. They can watch a lot of cartoons indoors, things of that sort. But generally, I think there's been a rise in cases of asthma and all the other respiratory-related problems. So this is one of the problems that you have, especially when it comes to transboundary haze. Essentially due to forest fires, due to replantation, and of course some of the Malaysian companies were blamed because Malaysian companies were going to Indonesia and they were planting this cash crops, especially oil palm, palm oil trees and plantations, and this is one of the activities. But generally this is a repeated occurrence. Every year we are having this, every year we have these problems. Indonesian government is doing a lot, in fact, to counter this, but it has not been really effective in that sense. So this is one of the problems that we have due to political economy that we are suffering. This is and this is the picture, as you can see from this slide. That's the map. That is to show the hotspot. This is sent by a friend of mine who is a Malaysian airline pilot. And I don't know, maybe probably this is the radar picture that he got. I'm not sure what picture is this. Just to show the hotspots and also the haze in Southeast Asia. That this was taken about 10-14 days back. Now this is to show that the environment is in dire straits now, and we need to do something about it. Now this is again to show some of the problems that we have in Asia. This has to do with the problem of water. There's a concept called water shortage and also vulnerability and stress, and those who are working in the area of water, they know what's the difference. So pretty much, although when you look at the plateaus, the water catchment area in Asia, we have the most, in fact, most rainfall, but in terms of per capita access to clean water, we are among the lowest, and this has caused for water conflicts in many parts of the world. One good example will be in India. My friends in India will also tell us that the problems they have between states, where rivers go dry and access to water become a problem, and conflict between states and all that. Of course, people have not gone to war for water, but there have been conflicts between communities to get access to clean water. Now this also has to do with human activity, over-industrialization, dam building activities that has caused all this problem. Now this is to show also this water stress. This was taken 2 years back, but I think that the situation is still pretty much the same. This to show that the level of water stress by countries, by regions. And you see that many part of Asia has been affected by it as well. Now, the next one, let me see. Okay, all right. Now, this is to show that this is the Mekong River basin. The Mekong River runs from China to few other countries in Indochina that flows through Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and also that it has a natural border towards Thailand as well. Now, because of the dam building activities in China, excessive dam, one of the biggest dams are there, the Three Gorges Dam, and you find that the level of water that flows into the lower riparian states is less. It has impacted the ecosystem. And we know that all these countries, Laos, Cambodia, are agrarian countries, agriculture countries, so therefore the access to clean water or access to adequate water is essential. So it also impacts the socio-economy of those countries as well. Now, all the damming activities or dam building activities, not damming, right? Dam building activities will probably be damming as well. For agriculture purposes, for political economy purposes as well. Now, from water, let us go to energy. Now, this is another problem. We know that energy is a limited source, it's scarce. Okay, we are a hydrocarbon society. Without hydrocarbon, without fossil fuel, we cannot survive. Right? We burn fossil fuel on a daily basis. So therefore, the demand for energy has increased tremendously. Although there has been a lot of improvements in the area of renewable energy, but still we are very much dependent on fossil fuel, and that has created a lot of problems in terms of greenhouse emissions and our over-dependency on fossil fuel products. Now let me just go straight to another slide. This is a picture of desertification, that areas become desert in Mongolia. All right, I'm not sure what desert is this. Maybe it's a Gobi Desert. Gobi Desert is Mongolia, right? Anybody from Mongolia? All right, okay. So because of industrialization, because of areas, forest areas has been used for agriculture, for other human activities, we find that deserts are expanding. Okay. So essentially, most of our environmental problem that we face today is essentially because of human activity. Our thirst for consumption, our need to expand. So therefore, we are now encroaching into Mother Nature. Now let's take stock of what had happened so far. Now, if you were to look, these are some of the statistics, just to show you. Every year we extract an estimated 55 billion tons of fossil fuel, minerals, metals and biomass from Earth. The world has already lost 80% of its forests, and we're continually losing them at the rate of 375 square kilometers per day. At the current rate of deforestation, 5 to 10% of the tropical forest species will become extinct every decade. Every hour, some 1,600, 700 acres of productive dry land become desert. 27% of our coral reefs have been destroyed. If the rate continues, remaining 60% will be gone in 30 years' time. We have a garbage island floating in our ocean, mostly comprised of plastics, the size of India, Europe and Mexico, right? All combined. We are using up 50% more natural resources from the earth than the earth can provide. At our current population, we need about 1.5 earths, which we do not have unless we migrate somewhere else. Now, let me see, it's not moving. Okay. Now let us look why such thing happened. Let us look at the fate of humanity. There must be a reason for it. Now let's go back a bit in history and look at where and how we went wrong. Somehow and somewhere back in history, humanity lost its way. We evolved in biologically rich world over tens of thousands of generations. However, we destroyed most of the biological richness in order to improve our lives and generate more people. I think Manila has enough people. Or the Philippines, or India for that matter. Anybody from China? Alright? Billions more people to the peril of the creation. Okay, now it works. Now, the human race strayed away from nature. At the beginning of civilization, humans accommodated the illusion of freedom from the world. Humans started to believe that they can be molded into something new to fit the changes in the environment and in the culture. This belief made the human species unresponsive to the forces that are detriment to their own long-term survival. I have a problem with this. Maybe I'm not pressing hard enough. Okay. Now, humans choose to remain innocent of the historical principle that civilizations collapse when their environment are ruined. Human leadership and belief system fail to safeguard nature. Neolithic revolution, the start of the modern man, fed the false assumption that a tiny selection of domesticated plants that we eat and animals can support human expansion indefinitely. Conservation seems to be the most rational solution in the management of Earth's natural economy, but many humans don't think that way at all. Now, modern technology and scientific revolution, to a certain extent, somewhat has betrayed Mother Nature. Fosters the belief that the cocoons of urban and suburban material life are sufficient for human fulfillment, living in what I call a synthetic ecosystem. This belief is against human nature. Humans are intrinsically aesthetic. All of us are religious, well, some not, and freedom seeking. And most of us will resist to be confined into living in a synthetic environment. However, humans took a wrong turn in the Neolithic period. Ever since, we have been trying to ascend from nature instead of to nature. Now, why is the nexus, which I was talking to you earlier? Now, humans and other forms of life require a healthy, sustainable ecosystem to live and thrive. Now, there is a realization at this point of time that Mother Earth has come under enormous stress due to human activities, primarily, and therefore we have to do something about it. Now, we have a common responsibility to ensure the sustainability and the longevity of the Mother Earth for future generation. So therefore, challenges to the rights of humans to live. It's a challenge to the right of humans to live in a safe, in a healthy, and a thriving environment. So that is where the concept of human security comes in. That is, to me, is a refinement of the 48th Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Which has been restated many times in most of the UN document, and most recently the 1994 UNDP report. So we need to securitize the environment in order to ensure that we have a sustainable environment for future generations. Now, this is something about environmental ethics, and most of you would know this. When we talk about environmental ethics, essentially it's about, basic things about whether we should or we should not, whether it is to be done or not to be done, whether it's good or bad or right or wrong. Such simple concepts. Now, you start off with that simple concept. Basically, when we talk about environmental ethics, we talk about ethical questions regarding human interaction with the environment, the responsibility that we have to protect the environment. Now, of course, environmental ethics is defined culturally. Of course, they have a universalistic principle. That also is a relative principle that involves particular community, right? I know that in Indonesia, although they are Muslim, predominantly Muslim community, but they have certain, in certain mountain communities, those who are volcanoes and all that, they have certain, ceremonies, in order to appease the mountain god or the volcanoes. So they have a mix of, religious beliefs in order to accommodate their notion of the environment and how to take care of the environment. So culture and the worldview affect perception of the environment and the environmental problems. People have different worldviews. All of us come from different cultures. Years of our interaction with nature may be different, and we develop certain objectives or certain aspects that we look at nature a bit differently. But having said that, there is a commonality, there is some level of universality that there is a need for us to take care of the environment. Now, there are some questions that essentially we have to ask when we talk about the environmental ethics is, should the present generation conserve resources for the future generation? Do we have the responsibility, or is it our responsibility to do so? Are humans justified in driving other species into extinction? We like to eat animals. I know we like to eat other species, right? We always, continuously we do that. Probably less in India, I suppose, because many of them are vegetarians. But they also eat vegetable species. Alright. It's okay. Is it okay to destroy the forest and create jobs for people? The problems that you have with economy, the right for you to live and to survive. We need to make sure, and we need to, encroach into the environment in order to do so. Is it okay for some communities to be exposed to more pollution than others? In Malaysia, there's an outcry that they wanted to build an incinerator just a few kilometers from my university. So there was a public outcry, and I'm not sure where they have moved it. Right? Probably far from a human population or settlement. So therefore the answer depends in part upon the ethical standards that individuals choose to use. Now this is a generic kind of a definition of environmental ethics, alright? It concerns human beings, as I mentioned earlier, and their ethical relationship with the natural environment. Let me just go to the next slide. Okay. Now the fundamental question that we need to ask is, what are the moral obligations that we have concerning to the natural environment? Although the question appears simple, it may generate several other probing questions and issues. Alright, like for example, do we have environmental obligation for the sake of human beings living in the world today? Just because we are there, so therefore we need to take care. Or for humans living in the future, do we have to take care of the environment in order for future generation? Or entities within the environment itself, irrespective of any human benefit. That means we just take care of the environment because it is just there. Alright. So different value system comes into play. We have the Chinese value system and the Indian value system, and probably the Southeast Asian archipelagic, the Malay Muslim community value system. So there are so many value systems that kind of gives some kind of explanation on how we need to deal with nature. Now these are the general perspective. One is Anthropocentrism, which is essentially human beings subscribe to the notion that human beings are at the center of worldview. Right, we are the leaders on Earth, not also on Earth, but also in the solar system, on the cosmos. Therefore, we have the right to exploit it or to use it. All non-human entities are ethically considered for their instrumental value to humans. When you look at a tree, it must serve a particular value to our existence. Alright, if it doesn't serve a particular value to existence, then probably it is less important. Strong element within the Abrahamic faith system as leaders, right? Also the central doctrine of some of the Western emphasis on human reasoning. And it is also said to be the cause of environmental disasters and climate change. And modern idealism believe that environmental problems can be solved through reason, through research and scientific breakthroughs. Now, as opposed to this, the second perspective, alright, is biocentrism. Biocentrism says that human is just one among the multitude of living species. One among. Shared, essentially shared by the Indian tradition. And they say that among the 8.5 million living beings, alright, transmigration of the soul. Meaning which they believe that you migrate, alright, from being a human, alright, to be a, I don't know, a plant or animals and all that. So therefore, we are looking at the concept of environment in totality. Human reason is limited and cannot fully understand the complexity of nature. So there is another thing that goes beyond mental reasoning, right? Something that we cannot understand, like the concept of God. Interdependency and responsibility to preserve the sense of humility, right? With a sense of humility. Now this is essentially, looking at the concept of shallow and deep ecology. Humans have no right to reduce the richness and diversity of nature. So you are looking at yourself as a part and parcel of the whole ecosystem. Now the third perspective is ecocentrism. Now this incorporates the perspective of the whole ecosystem. The ecosphere is inclusive rather than individual life forms, holistic approach towards environment, towards the politics, culture and the lifestyle. Now it's somewhat similar to what the Shinto believe from Japan, accepts nature as a part of the givenness of the world. Why? Because it is just like that, alright? The givenness of the world, as opposed to self-conscious view of nature. Often intertwined with religious and cultural outlook, limits humans' encroachment to the environment. The ecosphere hits back. The notion of when you do not take care of the ecosystem, the ecosphere may hit back, alright? And to re-establish an eco-balance. So whatever problems or whatever calamities that you may find or that happens, they may reason it from the perspective of ecocentrism, that it's Mother Nature trying to rebalance it. Some communities have rituals and practices to revere nature, and many Asian communities have that. The fourth perspective looks at cosmocentrism. Earth is just a part of a solar system, right? It is not only Earth, it is also Earth in the context of the solar system. And the idea of cosmos comes in, the entire cosmos. You can find this in the Indic tradition, in the Indian tradition, right? In Russian tradition, as well as the Sikh tradition. You know the Sikhs? The Sikhs with extra long hair. Alright. They believe in metaphysical belief of the Vedanta school, essentially in Hinduism. Attitude towards the environment varies from a resignation that the end of the world is inevitable to a more reverential approach to the limits of human reasoning. Now this is more religious kind of okay. Now essentially when you talk about environmental ethics, there are four important perspectives. One, whether human beings have ethical relationship with the environment. The second is it concerns humans' responsibility to safeguard and to preserve the environment. The third is to provide leadership, stewardship ethics in fact, to provide leadership in safeguarding and preserve the environment. And the fourth is environmental ethics concerns in the ensuring the Earth's resources remain adequate for future generations. Now, having said this, often when you talk about environmental ethics, it's often politicized. Because when you impose too much of ethics, it requires change in lifestyles. Am I right? When you want to, basically one of the problems of environment is overconsumption. If we can reduce our consumption, probably eat less. I know that you are being served. Alright, okay, maybe we have skipped breakfast today. But I have a tendency to think in Malaysia, when you attend a conference, there's 6 meals a day. I'm here as well the same, I suppose, Marlon. You're overfeeding us. Alright? So there's basically whenever you need to change, and change often is difficult, and people are so, into their own lifestyle, and change becomes difficult, especially in terms of consumption patterns. And the overuse of natural resources and the competition among states to influence resource-rich regions. Everybody are trying to get something out of the other country in terms of oil, in terms of coal, whatever it is. There is a competition for resources. So therefore, this has resulted in human security issues in many regions of the world. Now, when you go to, then let's go to the concept of human security, So having said or having identified the causes of environmental degradation and the human activities that has directly contributed to the whole problems of environment. Now, how do we do about it now? Alright? So I think this concept came about in 1994 with a UN report called the UNDP Development Report. It kind of identifies human security with 7 levels. The first is economic security, food, health, environment, personal, community, and political. And since then, I think there have been some work done by UNESCO and also by academia, especially all around the world, looking at how they could improve or securitize or bringing the focus to the environment and the livability of the planet. So this is probably we can concentrate on the fourth one, with the third one, which is environmental security. Policies and to put in place policies and practices to ensure sustainability and the protection of land, air, and also water. Now this is a matrix that we are looking at when we talk about human security. And if you look at the environment, it's a bit too small. Okay, it talks about reduction of severe weather, the condition that can damage the health and homes of people. It also talks about environmental disasters from may strain the economic and political resources of the state. Now it talks about environmental disasters. I can't see this as well. Okay, so these are some of the things that to bring it to light that there is a state responsibility in order to make sure that humans live in a safe and thriving environment. It's no longer about only what we call the sanctity of the state or the supremacy of the state, but the state has a responsibility to look at, to ensure that each individual or human beings have the right for a safe environment. So you cannot do anything that is detrimental to the sustainability of the planet. Now this has been said many times in all the COP meetings that you find in the UN circle, and a lot of academics have written on this as well, that a refocus of the state the mindset is required. Some states have gone further into you have green buildings and you have all this green thing has come into even when you have policy and things of that policy formulation have that idea of green thinking has come into place as well. Alright, so environment need to be securitized, meaning which we need to look at the environment as a security issue, so in order for you to protect the environment. So basic assumption is that environmental security refers to the safety of our environment from natural disasters and human activities that jeopardize the quality of life. So in order for you to do this, the political masters need to be educated, need to be moral. How to say, yesterday they were talking about, is it the moral person? There were two concepts, that was the moral agent, let's say. Okay, I think I have, alright. So if you look at the second point, environmental security is supposed to be the central to the national security debate, comprising of dynamics and interconnection among the natural resource base and the social fabric of the state and the economic engine of local and regional stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ravi.
Well,